I thought my husband's late nights and secretive behavior meant one thing. He was having an affair. Desperate for answers, I hired a private investigator, prepared to confront him with the truth. But the secret the PI uncovered was nothing I could have imagined. It left me questioning everything I thought I knew about the man I married. Subscribe to Stories Unfolded for more shocking revelations, unexpected twists, and stories that keep you on the edge of your seat. You won't believe how this one ends. Marriage, I had always believed, was built on trust. My husband, Daniel, and I had been married for 7 years, and for most of those years, I thought our relationship was solid. Sure, we had our share of arguments, like any couple, but I never doubted the foundation of love and trust that held us together. Or at least, I hadn't. Until a few months ago. It started with small things I could have easily ignored if they hadn't become so frequent. Daniel's phone, once casually left on the counter, now seemed permanently glued to his pocket. He started working late more often than usual, and when I asked about it, he brushed me off with vague excuses about last-minute meetings or tight deadlines. At first, I tried to convince myself I was overthinking. Daniel had always been a private person, and his job as a financial consultant often demanded odd hours. But then, there were the unexplained charges on his credit card, dinners at restaurants we'd never been to, boutique purchases I knew weren't for me. The final straw came when he missed our anniversary dinner, claiming he had to work late. When he came home, his shirt was slightly rumpled, and I caught a faint whiff of perfume that wasn't mine. I stayed silent that night, but inside, my doubts were growing louder by the minute. By the next morning, I had made up my mind. I didn't want to keep second-guessing myself or live with the anxiety that was eating away at me. If Daniel was cheating, I needed proof. And if I was wrong, well, I'd deal with that too. That's when I found myself sitting across from Mark Taylor, a private investigator recommended by a friend. Mark was a no-nonsense kind of man in his late 50s, with a calm demeanor that immediately put me at ease. "So," Mark said, leaning back in his chair, "what makes you think your husband's being unfaithful?" I hesitated, feeling a pang of guilt for even being in his office. "He's been acting differently," I admitted. "Working late, hiding his phone, spending money I can't explain. I need to know the truth." Mark nodded, his expression neutral. "I understand. These situations are never easy, but you've come to the right place. I'll tail him for a few days, see what he's up to, and report back to you." "Thank you," I said, my voice trembling slightly. As I left his office, I felt a mix of dread and relief. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face whatever Mark might find, but at least I was taking control of the situation. For the first couple of days, Mark's updates were uneventful. "Your husband's schedule seems normal," he said during our first phone call. "Work, a quick stop at the grocery store, then home." But on the third day, things changed. "Your husband left work early today," Mark told me. "He drove across town to an unfamiliar address. He's still there now." "What kind of address?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "A small private office building," Mark replied. "It's not listed under his company, and it's definitely not a place you'd expect for financial consulting." My mind raced with possibilities. Was this where he met the woman he was seeing? Was this some sort of secret hideaway? "Do you want me to go inside and investigate further?" Mark asked. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I need to know what's going on." The next day, Mark called me with an update that stopped me in my tracks. "I did some digging," he began, his voice unusually serious. "That office your husband's been visiting? It's registered under a private company that offers pro bono legal services. Legal services? I repeated, confused. What does that have to do with Daniel? That's what I wanted to find out, Mark continued. So I waited for him to leave and spoke with one of the receptionists. She told me your husband's been coming here for weeks, meeting with an attorney named Rachel Andrews. He's been working with her on something pretty significant. I held my breath, waiting for him to continue. Your husband is setting up a trust fund, Mark said, for a child. A child? I stammered, my heart sinking. That's right, Mark confirmed. But here's the kicker. It's not for a child he had with another woman. It's for a child he's planning to adopt. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Mark's words echoed in my mind. A child he's planning to adopt. 1,000 questions swirled in my head, each one louder than the last. Why hadn't Daniel told me? Was this why he'd been acting so secretive? And most importantly, who was this child? Are you sure? I asked Mark, my voice barely above a whisper. I double-checked everything, Mark replied. The trust fund is in the final stages of setup. The paperwork is clear. Your husband has been meeting with attorneys and social workers to finalize the adoption process. I sat down on the edge of my bed, my hands trembling. Why wouldn't he tell me? I muttered, more to myself than to Mark. That's something you'll need to ask him, Mark said gently. But I can assure you, there's no evidence of infidelity. Whatever your husband's reasons, they don't involve another woman. The relief of knowing he wasn't cheating was quickly overshadowed by confusion and a growing sense of betrayal. Daniel and I had always talked about having children one day, but adoption had never been part of the plan. Why would he make such a monumental decision without me? That evening, I waited for Daniel to come home, my heart pounding with a mix of anxiety and anger. When he walked through the door, carrying his briefcase and offering me a tired smile, I could barely hold back my emotions. "Hey, babe," he said, setting his things down. "How was your day?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stood in the living room, arms crossed, my gaze fixed on him. "We need to talk," I said firmly. Daniel's smile faltered. "Sure," he said cautiously. "What's going on?" "I know about the trust fund," I blurted out. "I know about the adoption." His face went pale, and for a moment, he looked like a deer caught in headlights. You know?" he stammered. "Yes, I know," I said, my voice shaking. "What I don't know is why you've been hiding it from me. Why didn't you tell me, Daniel? We're supposed to be a team." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling to find the right words. "I was going to tell you," he said finally. I didn't know how." "Didn't know how?" I repeated, my frustration bubbling over. "Daniel, this isn't some minor decision. You're adopting a child, and you didn't think I deserved to know?" "It's not that simple," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Please, just let me explain." Daniel took a deep breath, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. "Her name is Ella," he began. "She's 7 years old. I met her during one of my company's community outreach events a few months ago. She's in foster care, and she's been through a lot." He paused, his voice breaking slightly. "When I first met her, she barely spoke. But over time, she started opening up to me. She told me about how she's been in and out of foster homes since she was a baby. She doesn't have anyone, and I just couldn't ignore that." I felt a lump rise in my throat, but I stayed silent, letting him continue. "I started visiting her more often," he said. I didn't tell you because I wasn't sure where it was going. But the more I got to know her, the more I realized I wanted to give her a stable home, a family. Why didn't you include me in this? I asked, my voice trembling. Did you think I wouldn't agree? No, Daniel said quickly. That's not it. I didn't want to burden you with something you didn't ask for. I know how much you've been dealing with lately, and I didn't want to add more stress. I thought I could handle it on my own, at least until everything was finalized. I sat down on the couch, my emotions swirling between anger, sadness, and something I couldn't quite name. Daniel, I would have supported you, I said softly. I would have been there for you every step of the way. But instead, you shut me out. Do you have any idea how that feels? Daniel sat beside me, his head in his hands. I know, he said quietly. I messed up. I thought I was protecting you, but I see now that I was just being selfish. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his words hanging between us. Finally, I asked, what happens now? A week later, Daniel arranged for me to meet Ella. I wasn't sure what to expect, but the moment I saw her, my heart melted. She was a small, shy girl with big brown eyes and curly hair pulled into 2 neat pigtails. Hi, Ella, I said gently, crouching down to her level. I'm Sarah. It's so nice to meet you. Ella looked up at Daniel, who gave her an encouraging nod. Slowly, she extended her hand to shake mine. Hi, she said softly. As the afternoon went on, Ella began to warm up to me. She showed me her favorite book, a tattered copy of The Velveteen Rabbit, and even giggled when I attempted a silly voice for one of the characters. By the end of the visit, I knew one thing for certain. Daniel had been right about her. She deserved a home, and I wanted to be part of giving her that. Over the next few weeks, Daniel and I worked together to finalize the adoption process. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when the weight of it all felt overwhelming. But through it all, we grew closer, rebuilding the trust that had been strained. When Ella finally moved in, our home felt complete in a way I hadn't expected. She brought joy and laughter back into our lives, and I couldn't imagine our family without her. What started as a journey of suspicion and secrecy turned into one of love and redemption. Daniel's secret wasn't infidelity. It was a selfless act of compassion. This story reminds us that sometimes the things we fear most can lead us to something beautiful. It's a lesson in trust, forgiveness, and the unexpected ways life can surprise us. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Stories Unfolded. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And remember, love always has the power to heal.